You so much, Margaret. Are you ready for us to start now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I'm going to begin by introducing myself and then I'll turn it over to Beth. I guess the very first thing, though, before I tell you who I am, is just to tell you how excited we are to be here with all of you and how grateful we are for Margaret's invitation to join you in this. It's a real pleasure. So, I started my careers in education in public school and then university and moved from there into the corporate world and spent a lot of time there, ran my own business, eventually doing executive coaching and leadership development work before I really stumbled on a life-giving opportunity, and that was to take some classes, enroll in some programs at Shalem Institute for Spiritual Formation, which supports contemplative living and leadership. And I did a number of classes there, served on the board, and then served as the executive director for 6 years, and still continue to offer a few classes through Shalem. For the last several decades, though, there's kind of a switch away from that background career where I committed myself to creating closer relationships to Earth. That really what was drawing me and feeding my soul. And I felt called to invite others to do the same. So I led over a dozen pilgrimages to Iona, Scotland, Newfoundland, Cuba, Pacific Northwest. I tend to lead 5 or 6 retreats a year for various organizations, but always now with this focus on how we grow our relationship with the amazing living world in which we are a deep part. Year ago, a book I authored, Earth and Soul, Reconnecting Amid Climate Chaos, came out. And I wrote that book to be in conversation about how we might live fully alive and deeply connected in times when there is so much loss, how we might bear witness to what is the grief that surrounds us because of the loss of ecosystems and species, but also how we could fully claim joy and maybe even build some stepping stones toward a future of mutual thriving. For 4 years, Beth and I collaborated on a course on the spiritual wisdom of trees through the Center for Spirituality in Nature. And this year, the book that we're talking about tonight came out. So it's been a joy to work with Beth, and I'll turn it over to her to introduce herself.
Thank you, Leah. And I'm echoing our appreciation for Margaret and the work that Margaret and her compatriots are doing in the world. Such important work, essential work, I would say. So gratitude for that. I actually have a degree in forestry from many years ago, and have always worked at some kind of intersection of earth related conservation. And so I worked on Capitol Hill back in the US Senate, back when I like to say when we actually passed laws for good. Uh, so regardless of your political orientation, I think we can agree that not too much is happening on the conservation front right now in Congress. So that was a privilege to do that. And I then worked for the environmental and organization American Rivers. Felt that we were still making mostly intellectual arguments, and it felt like there was something more to this earth-saving business. So I went to theological seminary and got a bunch of degrees, worked at the intersection of earth and faith, co-founded an organization called the Green Seminary Initiative, trying to get more attention in theological schools for earth engagement and earth protection and saving. But it felt to me continually that there was still something missing in our attempts to engage with Earth fully, to protect her and restore her. I think we can all agree that Earth continues to be in trouble, regardless of all these fine efforts, both in the secular community and in the religious community. So I started with the help of many others, Center for Spirituality and Nature. Tomorrow we are celebrating our 10th anniversary here in Washington, D.C. The center brings people out into the living world to develop deep and spiritual relationships with nature and kindles a reciprocal relationship, a loving relationship. It felt to me that, and others who helped me start the organization, that this deep and abiding connection, this intimate connection, was missing in our attempts to save Earth. And that when we see it and engage with it and love it, that's when we will begin to make the move, the transformation that we will need to do the work in the world that we are all called to do if we are going to save this beautiful planet of ours. So that's what I've been up to. I stepped down as the executive director in February and have been doing a lot of retreat leading, class leading, public speaking on this connection of with Earth, this deep spiritual connection that we all have if we pay attention to it with Earth. So let me just tell you a little bit about what we have in mind. Of course, we're going to open ourselves to spirit, and she may have a mind of her own as we move forward. But our planned agenda is that Leah will ground us and do a brief grounding process. She's going to do an invitation, which she'll tell you more about, to engage with trees, and in fact, in particular, your teacher tree a little bit more personally. Then we're going to turn it over to Leah. She's going to talk a little bit about a part of the book that we think is really important, collaboration and connection. She'll turn it back over to me, and I'll talk about resilience and renewal, and maybe hope and delight a little bit. And throughout that, we would encourage you to stay busy in the chat with any comments and questions. And Margaret's going to be tending to the chat. We'd love to hear more from you. We're going to pause a few times to ask what you're feeling and thinking during our time together. And then eventually we're going to open it up, we hope, for a good long time to have a conversation and ask you what's coming to your mind. We may do a spiritual practice and we'll see how we go. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Leah, who's going to ground us and center us for this evening.
Thanks, Beth. Well, I would invite you to take just a few minutes to be fully present in this place at this time. You might want to begin by rolling your shoulders back and kind of letting go of some of the tension of the day and what it took you to get here at this time. Perhaps lowering your eyes or closing them if you're more comfortable that way. Putting your hands in an open position so that you signal to your body that you're willing to be receptive, that you are open and present and available, heart open, feet on the ground, connecting to that ground of our being, even if it is through the floor of our homes. And then on your own, a few slow, deep breaths. Attending to bringing that air into your lungs that is coming to you from the trees around you. And returning the breath back to the trees, exchanging that oxygen and carbon dioxide. And then let come to your mind a tree, maybe one that has special meaning for you. maybe one you return to often, possibly one from your childhood, or maybe even it's a tree you only saw once, but who captured your imagination. Just see what tree wants to show up for you. And in your imagination, see yourself near to this tree. Ask permission to know her and be known. And of course, listen for her response and move on to a different tree if that's what seems called for. And then perhaps finding a comfortable sitting position in your imagination where you are gazing upon this tree. Let your eyes be soft in your imagination, moving slowly from the base of the tree, the roots you can see on the ground, perhaps. Moving slowly up the trunk, taking in the colors and textures. Continuing up the tree and noting how she branches again and again, perhaps, until the tiniest twigs appear. Are there leaves? Are there needles? Have they fallen? What's their shape? What's their color? And still, in your imagination, close your eyes and now take in this tree with your touch. The trunk, the limbs, the leaves. How do they feel? What do you smell? Listen now. What are you hearing? What is the music of this tree or these woods in which you found yourself? Is there something you might taste? So we're going now to, if it feels right for you, ask permission of your tree to introduce her into this circle, to allow her to be part of our time together. And so you might gently open your eyes and come back to our time together, still feeling that connection to the tree that chose you. or whom you chose. And then consider how you might introduce your tree to the rest of us in just 5 words or less. That could include a proper name, but it doesn't have to. Could be only descriptive words, maybe a noticing of what you felt or saw, or an image. So the chat is open for you to introduce your tree into this circle. So let's just take a few minutes to allow you to do that. No pressure to be profound. And as you put your words in the chat, then you'll want to scroll to see what other trees are coming into our circle to sit with us today. There's some beauties here, some real beauties here. Mm. Thank you so much for those images. And if you didn't finish that, you can still add them in, but we'll keep having a few moments to look at them a little later. So now that our circle has been expanded, um, we have a circle of kin, perhaps none of the kin that we know terribly well, but kin nonetheless, because we are sharing this relationship on this amazing earth. And that's going to lead me right into the conversation that Beth mentioned. We each chose one kind of section of the book that we felt both as particularly meaningful to us, but also that we wanted to share with you today. And in this conversation, we're sharing a little bit about what we've learned from our teacher trees. Part of the invitation in this book is to invite you to choose a teacher tree, and perhaps you already have just in this practice we just did together. One of the most important lessons for me is this sense of connection and collaboration that trees have taught me. So I'm going to share screen here and just to give you a few pictures while I talk so you have a little more than just looking at me. Um, so you may know that these are coast redwoods. And if you see this person in the middle of the screen down at the bottom, it gives you a sense of scale of the coast redwoods. These enormous, tallest of trees that can be as tall as a 30-story building grow in California, Oregon, Washington, along the Pacific coast. And they depend on fog for moisture, so that's a lovely place for them to be, except that it leaves them vulnerable to the storms that come in from the Pacific. Now, how in the world will trees 30 stories tall withstand immense storms? I I always say that if I had to guess, I would say, well, my response would be develop a really deep tap root. Try to dig into that ground as much as I can so that I can hang on. But the coast redwoods do not have a deep taproot. They have a very fine root system that is not at all deep. So, how do they hang on? Well, they have learned to weave their roots together. And this is above ground. That's not, of course, where most of their roots are woven together. This is simply just a picture to remind you about how complex root systems can be, way beyond our seeing. But here are these amazing trees who have learned about community, that weaving together, they are stronger. So, of course, if you take one out of the middle of the forest, the community will feel it. They are just the beginning of trees that teach us about how to connect and why connection is so important. Trees not only connect by intertwining their roots, they connect through these vast fungal networks that exchange nutrients with the fungal network and the tree, but also allow them to exchange nutrients with each other and to send messages to each other to warn of danger so that trees can give off the appropriate chemicals to perhaps repel invading insects. There are many stories of different kinds of trees who share in this way through the fungal network. One of those stories is about beech trees in an old beech forest. These amazing trees will protect the most vulnerable among them. Not only the eldest of trees, but those who have less sunshine, those who have less access to water. When scientists look at them, they find that they are photosynthesizing in exactly the same amount as the trees who have better access. How could that be? It's because they're giving away nutrients to each other. Trees somehow know that an intact forest is healthier than a tree that's left on its own. And so they work to protect this intact forest by helping each other out. If you allow individual trees to die off, you weaken the whole. It's not only the beech trees who know this, pines send nutrients to the elders. I always say, if those of you who are feeling a little weary want to tell your children this is a good message to give them. Let your children know that trees have learned to support their elders. So many trees support each other through the underground network. Some of you may know the work of Suzanne Simard, a scientist in British Columbia, who learned and shared with us about how firs and birch exchange nutrients. There's a concern that because the paper birch trees are deciduous trees and have large leaves, they might be depriving the firs of the sunshine that they need to photosynthesize. But what Suzanne Simard found is that, in fact, when the paper birch is fully leafed out, they send nutrients to the fir trees via this mycorrhizal network and allow the fir trees to continue to flourish. And guess what? Paper birch drop their leaves in the fall, and then the fir trees return the favor. They live in reciprocity. They give back the nutrients when the paper birch is not able to photosynthesize. So all of this is going on in the underground network in this amazing community that trees are telling us are so important. 90% of plants, 90% of plants are connected into this underground fungal network. Get back so I can see you. They are living in community. They are intelligent. They are connected. They're alive, and they're acting in reciprocity. It is not all about competition. Healthy forests depend on communities. And of course, we know it's more than just tree to tree relationships. We know that oak trees are very instrumental in supporting insects, particularly caterpillars. And if you want birds and love birds, you want caterpillars in your oak trees. Why? Because it takes a lot of caterpillars to feed a clutch of little birds in the springtime. Those fledglings need to eat. Trees, of course, provide habitat and food for so many birds and insects and mammals, and those beings then return the favor, whether it's debugging the tree, as so many birds do, or sharing pollen, or burying nuts, maybe as the jays do, and then forget about them so that other trees can grow. There's an amazing sharing going on, a reciprocity in all of the forest world. Trees build soil through leaf litter and fallen branches as they fall to the ground and die and decay. They help purify and store water, releasing it to plants in times of drought, allowing water to nourish the soil, to fall into springs and aquifers and underground rivers, where it can become our drinking water. They purify the air through their leaves. There's a reason we talk about sprucing up the air, because that's what the spruce trees are doing. They offer shade, reduce the temperatures and the heat of summer, support Earth systems, and we too are part of this community. Trees give us life. We breathe oxygen that feeds our cells. We depend on a community of plants for nutrients and the food that we eat. We are part of this amazing living network. We would not have pure water to drink if the trees were not supporting us and storing that. We are of the trees. From their 375 million years in existence, they are sacred wisdom wrapped in beauty, descended from the same cosmic evolution that produced us. So trees debunk the myth of separation, which is what I think is one of the most important things we can learn from trees. We are not separate. We are inextricably woven into the web of life. And when we buy into this illusion of separation that is so prevalent in our Western worldview, we are lonely, not just for human companionship, but for our place in the family of things. Innately, we know that we are connected, and yet we forget that. It is not a part of our day-to-day memory. So take a minute and check in with your tree that you brought into this circle. What gifts do you notice that this tree is giving to the world around her? What gifts is she offering to you? How is she connected? And you might just look around where you sit, where you're sitting right now, and notice the gift of trees. What do you see around you that's come from trees? Robin Wall Kimmerer, the wonderful author of Braiding Sweetgrass, who is a Potawatomi Indigenous woman and a botanist and professor, reminds us of that word reciprocity. And she says that because we receive these gifts, it is not simply gratitude that arises within us. Of course, we want gratitude to arise in us, and we want to acknowledge our gratitude for the trees. But we also, she says, have a responsibility then to give back, to give back. So, how might we want to respond to the gifts of these trees? So, whatever you notice in the way of gifts, whatever you notice arising in you as a call to respond to those gifts, you might want to share that in the chat if that feels right to you. And so, Beth, would you like to share a little bit with us about resilience?
Oh, thank you, Leah. And I should add, there's so much more on all these topics in the book. They're just little tiny tidbits here. And please keep moving into the chat with your comments, with the gifts, with your gifts that you might offer. Want to keep this interactive and having you and your trees be part of this sacred conversation. I'm also going to share a little bit. All right. I trust you're seeing my slides here. So, would someone audibly tell me if you see resilience and renewal?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
You might want to run it as a slideshow, but you don't have to. We're just seeing the ones along the side as well.
You're seeing yourselves as well.
Yes, we're also seeing your other slides alongside. You might want to do it as a run the show, but it's up to you.
Well, I would if I could, but I will do this.
It's okay, it works.
Yeah. Let's see. Is that better? All right. So one of the things that fascinates me so much about trees and is how they mirror for us, how they model for us. As Leah said, they've been around for 350, 370 million years. They've learned a few things, given the onslaught that with that they've been they've experienced. If you think about all the things that trees have put up with, lightning and storms and fire and insects and us, and yet they're still surviving. They have lots to teach us about how we might survive during our challenging times. And certainly, I think we can agree that it's a very uncertain time right now. And we can look to our teacher trees and trees in general for some lessons. Trees, as we know, they live for the light, don't they? They're all about moving toward the light, moving toward that life-giving source. Their leaves are full of chlorophyll that will be activated only by sunlight, and just what feeds the tree, it gives it its nourishment. And I love this picture that was taken by my friend in Shenandoah National Park. Look at what this tree has had to do, has had to go through to reach the light. See if this doesn't ring some bells for you. Are there times in your life or times that we have culturally had to grow down, had to grow sideways, had to grow then given the opportunity to grow up? Trees tell me in this space that we need to be willing to adapt. always, to be willing to change our perspective, our point of view. And they still, I love this tree so much because she persists, doesn't she? Despite the many machinations that she's had to make, she goes on and she inspires me to go on and to look for ways that I too can adapt and move sideways and backwards. And that we don't always have to be moving forward, that sometimes we have to take another path, particularly now. This tree, too, you'd think that she would have given up the ghost. She has had to grow completely sideways to reach the light, and her branches almost look like trees as she's moved toward the light. One of the things that we mention in the book, too, is that these leaves that are what is actually bending the tree toward the light, this search for photosynthesis, this need for energy, that the growth, actually the movement happens on the dark side of the leaf as it moves toward the sun. And so what is it that is on our shadow side, our dark side, that will catapult us toward this living in the light? So much that trees can teach us about living in difficult times, in dark times. Trees also teach us how to be resilient. And I would encourage you to take a walk along a stream bed and see these trees that tenaciously hold on despite flooding, despite current, despite many, many obstacles, and still they persist, they resist, they hold on. And especially now when things seem so turbulent and we seem so, I don't know, sometimes I feel attacked, if you will, by the forces that are at play today. These trees remind us that we can hold on. And as Leah said, we can hold on with the help of others, with that rootedness and that entanglement that we don't see with this tree, but we know is there. Leah showed you pictures of the redwoods. This is a little farther inland with the sequoias. Look at the damage that these trees have withstood from fire, hotter than ever these days. What you don't see here is the tops of these trees are full of green. These trees, despite what they've been through, the heat of the fire, they've been through it. And yet still they persist, still they grow, still they find the light. And they inspire me, and I hope you too, to keep going, to keep moving through our woundedness, personal and cultural, political, and otherwise. And of course, there's some forests that have been all but destroyed by fire in recent years. We've lost hundreds of thousands of acres. And so too, the forest can offer a place where we come to grieve not only ecological loss, but personal loss. Joanna Macy cautions us that we cannot look away from suffering and loss, that will numb us to the energy that we need to move in its behalf. This is the fire that fire in the 1980s at Yellowstone that all but destroyed so many, many acres. A place where we can bear witness to our own personal wounds and the wounds that we have collectively inflicted on Earth. We have a beautiful chapter written by Leah in the book on bearing witness. And still, despite this woundedness in Yellowstone, this is what it looked like 10 or 15 years later. You can see the burned out forest behind. So forests remind us of the renewal that is possible, even in the darkest, most difficult circumstances. Here are the lodgepole pine coming out in the midst of pain, in the midst of suffering, this renewal. And this gives me so much hope for our times. What's underneath the fire and the suffering? What's in the soil, in the depths of the dark? What little pine seedlings are gestating right now beyond our sight, beyond our knowledge, ready to give new life to our circumstances? I wanted to share too with you this serotinous cone. It's so many cones, pine trees especially in the West, the lodgepole and the ponderosa, they need fire to open. And so as we go through our own challenging times, what is being invited as we are subjected to fire, literal or figurative fire? Are we invited to open in the midst of these tough times, these hard times? The need for fire, the need for hard times, the need for suffering to open us to new possibilities and new life. And finally, I wanted to share with you, this is what foresters call a nurse log. It's a big Doug fir, I think, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. That in the forest, that death has no real finality. And this to me gives me so much hope for our times, personal losses that we've suffered, cultural losses, political losses that are happening right now. This big old Doug fir came down with a thud, and for all intents and purposes, she's dead, no longer life within her. And yet, look at the life that's coming out of this nurse log, lichen and moss and saplings coming out of this all but dead tree. One of the gifts of the forest, certainly to me and to so many others, is that death offers an opportunity for renewal. As Leah said, for new soil, the leaves, the dead leaves that are coming down to nourish the ground. So what new life is happening in the midst of death that may be happening in your life? Not final. I share in the book that as I was studying eternal life from the great theologians and getting all confused about it, this to me is eternal life, life coming right from death in the forest. So again, as we did before, a few words that might be coming up for you as we talk about resilience, as we talk about adaptation, as we talk about bearing witness, as we talk about resilience and renewal and hope. You might imagine your tree in your mind's eye and see what suffering that she may have encountered, how she's adapting, how she's modeling resilience for you during these times. And share these ruminations in the chat, if you will. We'll give you a few moments here, and then we want to open it up to further conversation. What adaptations, what wounds has your tree had and lived through? How is she perhaps inspiring you to be resilient in these times? I'm just going to give us a couple of minutes to go into silence as we consider the gifts, more gifts from our teacher trees. Beautiful comments coming in. Encourage you to read some of the comments coming in. Storms, wind, drought, loss of limbs, gaping wounds, split in two and yet survives. Standing watch over ancestors' graves. We'll continue in this conversation through the chat. I'd like to open it up in our remaining 10 or 12 minutes to any comments or questions you might have.
I was so moved by the part of the book that where one of you was writing about what the trees have had to witness at our hands, having no say in the murders that they took a part in, what they have had to suffer at our hands.
Well, thank you, Margaret. Leah, hop in here if you'd like. I think you wrote that. We tried to be very careful because there are so many different communities that will have different responses to trees. And we mentioned in the book, Carolyn Finney reminds us that in many, many communities, trees are still a reminder of the heinous use of them for lynchings and other horrible purposes. And the trees, of course, no choice. And we want to honor that and honor those experiences.
And I think that gives us some sense of unity with the trees to know that they have had to bear witness to loss among themselves and among others within the forest. And so we know they know what it's like to face loss. And so it does mean too that as we feel loss, we can take that to the trees and be in conversation, whether that's actually verbalized or simply a conversation of the heart. So thank you for bringing that up, Margaret. So there's such beautiful comments in the chat, Beth. I hate to not read them all out loud, but there's not time for doing that. And I hope you all have been reading them because there's such wisdom there.
And I'm going to turn it back to Margaret, but I might suggest that before we do that, as we all unmute and we go back in the chat and to Tom's beautiful saying, I love you of a tree. Now I'm not finding it, but there it is. I'll start and then we can do it together. We can maybe we'll do a call and response here. So
Beth, before you do that, could we just be sure, or maybe you were going to do that later, so I might have jumped ahead, but could we just be sure that we pause for a minute and say a deep thank you to the trees we brought into our circle, our own, and those that shared with us because other people brought them in. So I just want us to be sure and say how grateful we are and to release them from our imagination, but to promise to keep coming back to visit maybe literally,
Well,
if
thank
that's
you.
possible.
Let's take a moment to do that, and then we'll send out "I love you" and pass it
Yeah.
back to Margaret. So take a moment. Gratitude, release them back to the wild where they are most comfortable. Just a moment, and we will breathe them out. I invite everyone to unmute and repeat after me. Namula,
Om
Namnamula,
Namula,
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 Namula.
Namula,
Namulo.
Together,
Thank you.
Namula,
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 Namilo,
Namula.
Milo.
Namilo.
Thank you, Tom. I
Thank
love
you.
you. Margaret,
I'm so
we'll turn it
grateful
back to
for
you
all
now.
of the tree friends we've brought into this space and all of you friends who have shared this with us. Leah and Beth, your work is inspiring. And the message of surrender and acceptance that comes from the trees, that is not giving up, that acceptance and surrender are not giving up, and the strength from the trees. Oh, surely they are our spiritual teachers in these times. I'm grateful for you bringing that to the forefront for us. We need them. We need them. And we are grateful for you. And I feel like the sun has set where I am, but I'm going right out to my tree when we end here to give her a hug.
Oh.
Grateful. I'm going to turn off the recording now, but if there are any last words that anybody would like to share, please do feel free to share some gratitude in this space. And also a reminder that we will be back in this space on Saturday to talk informally across our traditions and across our continents about where this is sitting for us in these days after this. And also we will be here for our regular time on Sundays, where we share practices from different traditions for half an hour every week. So to you, my friends, deep gratitude.